Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had someone ask me in the live stream. Actually, they brought it up a couple times. Someone said, "Hey, it seems like Mentzer's training methods are becoming more popular again. He's kind of come back into vogue. A lot of people are talking about it. What really, when you look at it yourself, because you seem to agree with some things he said, but not others. What do you think about discussing Mentzer's training today? And again, keep in mind, guys, I'm a strength coach. I don't care so much about bodybuilding per se, but we do care about getting as big as possible for powerlifting purposes, right? We want to gain muscle. Bigger muscle has more strength potential. Obviously, you want to get bigger. We want to maximize our size also. And Mentzer did believe in going pretty heavy. So there's definitely some overlap. But here's the issue that we run into, and it's what I would say to people. Mentzer got a lot of things right, and he got a lot of things wrong. And when you look at some of the current data on volume, proximity to failure, things like that, it does make Mentzer's stuff look a little bit better when you look at, say, the 2023 data and meta-analysis and stuff that we have on this, all the scientific data. In the sense that it looks like in many cases, it's actually possible if you train hard enough, and there's the key word. If you train hard enough, in many cases, not all cases, it's actually possible to reach nearly maximum muscle growth on less than 10 sets a week for a muscle group, for some muscles, for some lifters, right? The general consensus is still closer to about, 10, maybe a little more sets. Some muscles can handle more, but the thing is, if we're doing really hard sets, well, what do we mean by hard sets? Either reaching failure or coming up about a rep short. And how do I usually define that? It's slow. And in other words, when muscle failure is when you reach temporary failure, not when you rest 5 seconds and then try to grind out another rep and then get it. So what we're looking for is when we say 1 rep from failure, meaning the last rep you can probably do with decent form, but where the weight moves a lot slower. In other words, you can tell when you're 1 rep from failing. The weight moves 30, 40, 50% slower. You cannot move it as fast. Period. You can't. You'll see that rep. You'll see the difference. The weight slows down just a little bit. And, the data does show that when we get close to failure, we need less total sets, right? Either failure, 1 rep away, a little more with 2 reps away. I like to do a lot of training about 1 to 2 reps from failure. Some of my smaller movements I'll take to failure, right? A lot of that benching you're seeing there with 315, it's all pause. It's like 1 rep from failure. Okay, those rows were probably maybe 2 reps. I could have ground out 1 more decent rep, and then after that it would have been really ugly. But I had to cheat my ass off. So there is a lot of that. And because of those things, and then the same thing, the data we have on mechanical tension, right? Mechanical tension itself, which is, again, stuff that he more or less tried to reiterate is, he did get some stuff right. He did get some stuff right, but here's the problem. If you have a historic figure who can no longer change what they're teaching based upon the current scientific evidence, and they got some stuff right and they got some stuff wrong, you don't use them as a guide. You don't step back and say, aha, this guy in certain areas, made some observations that were very, very good, and he got some stuff right. But he also got some stuff wrong. But because the modern literature shows that he did get some stuff right, that we're going to then adopt his philosophy. That is unwise. An intelligent and rational person, and let's give Mentzer credit. Mentzer liked to use those terms. He liked to discuss, let's be rational. A rational person would step back and say, okay, that's good. This guy did get some stuff right. Let's now look at the modern scientific evidence and what we can test repeatedly and demonstrate in the lab with modern equipment where we can see what's going on. We can literally scan the inside of muscles and know how much tissue hypertrophy occurred over time. We can measure these things. Our technology is way better. We can do so much measuring electromagnetic activity in muscles, muscle activation, nervous system activation, how much muscle growth occurs, inflammation markers, all this stuff. We can measure these things. Hey, so then we say, but he got this right, this right, this right, but then he got this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. So we don't use this philosophy. A rational person would step back and say, let's look at the evidence. And instead of adopting an entire philosophy, let's just adopt a new philosophy. Let's build one based around the evidence of what we can prove. Because there were things he got wrong. How about going beyond failure? You know what? The scientific literature hasn't been as kind. Here's what you usually find. A lot of the stuff that he taught with that, doing the forced reps, forced negatives, all these things, right? What's the research show? They don't really add muscle growth, but they beat your recovery up. So let's go back over to stuff he did believe that recovery was finite. What we find is that those sort of sets, these, again, which you then saw Joe Weider call intensity principles, it turns out they add very, very, very little in the way of muscle growth, but they add a lot of fatigue that eats up recovery. Okay, so much so that it will reduce how often you can train. So let's come back over to that. What did Mentzer always have? People doing really long frequencies between training a muscle again. Whereas in the reality is that if we train optimally, we can train a little more frequently. We can train muscles twice a week and still elicit a maximum training response. But if we're careful on the fatigue management side and we step back and we don't do things that destroy our recovery further, guess what? We recover enough that we can train the same muscle again in 3 or 4 days. Okay? So a lot of the principles that he applied, it turns out, actually are harmful, because being able to do that little bit of extra frequency with maximum stimulation and a little lower total fatigue lets us get more muscle growth over several months. So there were things he got wrong, and a lot of it was the frequency and the intensity techniques. A lot of the volume, he wasn't incorrect. At least in the direction. He didn't get it exactly right, but he was a lot closer than people were even thinking 10 years ago, based upon some of the really bad science. And there's some dogmatic individuals who push some nonsense that the data didn't really show, and they're very popular. And it turns out that the volumes for maximum growth are a little lower than we thought they were. If you're training hard. That's the key word, isn't it? Are you training hard? Are you training hard? Kind of an important factor there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.